The room was dead silent. 47 floors above Seoul, in a boardroom that smelled of power and old money, Jae-won Kwon, billionaire, head of the Kwon Empire, and the most feared man in South Korea's underworld, stared at a single white envelope on the table in front of him. His hands, usually so steady they could sign a man's death warrant without trembling, were shaking. His personal physician stood 3 feet away, saying nothing. The DNA results were inside that envelope. And every single person in that room knew that whatever was printed on that paper was about to change everything. Jae-won reached for it. Slowly. Like a man reaching into a fire. He tore it open. He read the first line. And then, Korea's most untouchable billionaire, a man who had never once shown weakness in public, crumpled forward and collapsed. Before we begin, my mum said this video cannot reach 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get into this story. But to understand why that piece of paper broke him, we have to go back. 8 months earlier. Accra, Ghana. The air smelled like jollof rice, rain, and possibility. Adwoa Mensah was late. Again. Adwoa, you were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago. Her best friend Oma hissed into the phone. I know. The Tiaro broke down on the ring road and a goat literally stepped on my foot, so I think the universe is against me attending this thing, Adwoa said, weaving through the crowd on Oxford Street with her phone tucked between her ear and her shoulder, her locks flying behind her, her yellow dress catching the late afternoon sun like a flag of defiance. She was 28 years old, a cultural liaison consultant for international business delegations visiting West Africa, and she was the most annoyingly capable person she knew. She could negotiate a trade deal in 3 languages, cook kontomire stew that made grown men emotional, and deliver a withering comeback so fast the target didn't feel it until they were already bleeding. The event she was late to was a welcome reception for a Korean investment delegation at the Kempinski Hotel. Standard work. Smile, translate cultural context, keep the wealthy foreigners from accidentally offending everyone. She pushed through the glass doors of the hotel lobby, smoothed her dress, squared her shoulders, and walked directly into a wall. Except the wall was warm. And wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent for 3 years. Oh, she started. Watch where, he started. They both stopped. Jae-won Kwon looked down at her with the expression of a man who had never been bumped into in his life. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the kind of bone structure that seemed architecturally unfair. He was tall, absurdly tall for a Korean man, her brain noted unhelpfully, and he radiated the specific energy of someone who was used to rooms going quiet when he entered. Adwoa looked up at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she said, "You really shouldn't stand in the middle of doorways. It's a fire hazard. Also a people hazard. Also just rude." Every single member of his security detail flinched. Jae-won blinked. Once. Nobody spoke to him like that. Nobody had spoken to him like that in, possibly ever. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Something more dangerous than anger. Interest. "You work for the delegation?" he asked. His Korean accent was thick but his English was precise, deliberate, like every word was chosen with surgical care. "I work with the delegation. There's a difference." She extended her hand. Adwoa Mensah. Cultural liaison. "You must be one of the Kwon group. Though I didn't expect the head of it to be lurking near the entrance like a bouncer." His mouth did something that was almost, a smile. He took her hand. Jae-won Kwon. "I know who you are," she said pleasantly. "I did my research. You own half of Seoul and parts of 3 other cities, you haven't given a press interview in 4 years, and the last journalist who tried to corner you at a gala ended up reassigned to cover traffic in Busan." She tilted her head. "Should I be scared?" He studied her for a long moment. "Most people are." "I'm not most people." She retrieved her hand and smiled, bright, genuine, slightly wicked. "Welcome to Ghana, Mr. Kwon. Try the Keller wheel at the reception. It'll change your life." She walked past him. He turned and watched her go. Behind him, his chief of staff, Minesio, leaned close and murmured, "Should I find out who she is?" I already know who she is, Jae-won said quietly. Min Seo frowned. Sir. But Jae-won was already walking, his eyes tracking Adwoa across the lobby, something unreadable moving behind his gaze. He knew who she was. That was the problem. The reception was a success by every measurable standard, and by the end of the night Adwoa had charmed 3 executives, mediated one almost disaster involving an accidentally offensive toast, and eaten enough kelaweel to feel like a goddess. She was collecting her bag from the coat check when a card appeared in her peripheral vision. Matte black. Embossed. Heavy as a small stone. She looked at it. Then at the man who'd placed it on the counter beside her. Jae-won Kwon was watching her with that almost smile again. Dinner, he said. Not a question. She picked up the card. Turned it over. Is this how you ask women out? You just appear beside them and say one word. It works. That is genuinely horrifying, and also I believe you. She slipped the card into her clutch. I'll think about it. She walked away. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Outside, in the warm Accra night, she pulled out the card and looked at it again. There was no number. No address. Just his name. And on the back, handwritten in precise strokes, "You'll know how to find me." She laughed out loud into the night air. She absolutely hated that she was already planning what to wear. 3 days later, Adwoa called the number she'd found, after exactly 4 minutes of internet research, connected to the Kwon Group's Seoul headquarters. She asked for Jae-won Kwon. The receptionist told her, with barely concealed alarm, that Mr. Kwon did not take unsolicited calls. Tell him Adwoa from the Kempinski called, she said cheerfully. Tell him I figured out how to find him. I suspect he'll be pleased. There was a 45-second silence. Jae-won picked up. You took 3 days, he said. I was busy. I also wanted you to wonder. She settled into her office chair and put her feet up on her desk. So, this dinner. Where, when, and please tell me it's not somewhere that puts food on a tiny plate and calls it fine dining. I need actual quantities of food. Something that might have been a laugh moved through the line. Low and brief, like he was surprised by it. I'll handle the location. That is not reassuring from a man whose idea of a card is a matte black slab with no information on it. You found me anyway. I did. She smiled. Don't make me regret it. The restaurant he chose was called Nuracha, a private dining experience on the rooftop of a boutique hotel in Labwon, the kind of place that wasn't listed anywhere and required someone to know someone. The table was set with candles and a view of Accra's skyline that made the city look like scattered gold. Adwoa arrived 5 minutes early. She was never early, because she refused to give him the satisfaction of making her wait. He was already there. He stood when she walked in. Old-fashioned courtesy from a man who looked like he invented danger. He was in dark trousers and a deep navy shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and Adwoa spent exactly half a second deciding that this was deeply unfair before she arranged her face into its best pleasant neutral expression. You're early, she observed, sitting down. I'm always early. He sat across from her. You were going to be early to beat me. I was going to be early because I'm professional and punctual. You were going to be early to beat me, he repeated calmly. She pointed at him. I don't like you. You like me a little. I like the view. The view is spectacular. You happen to be sitting in front of it. He smiled. A real one this time, and it transformed his face so completely that Adwoa felt her careful pleasant neutral expression wobble dangerously. The man was devastating when he smiled. This was a problem. Dinner arrived in careful courses, and it was, she had to admit, actual quantities of food. Real, beautiful, Ghanaian inflected food. Grilled tilapia with a Korean spiced crust. Jollof rice with gochujang butter. Kelaweel with sesame and honey. She looked at the food. Then at him. You researched what I said at the hotel. I pay attention. You made a Ghanaian Korean fusion menu for our first dinner. I wanted you comfortable. She looked at him for a long moment. The candlelight was doing things to his face that she was choosing not to think about. You know, she said carefully, Men who seem this thoughtful are usually hiding something catastrophic. Like a secret family. Or a yacht named after an ex. I don't have a secret family. Do you have a yacht? 3. Are any of them named after a woman? A pause. One is named after my mother. Adwoa softened despite herself. That's actually sweet. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. She laughed, a real one surprised out of her, and across the table, Jae-won watched her laugh with an expression he would have denied, under any interrogation, was wonder. But it was. Over the next 2 hours, she learned, he had been running the Kwon Empire since he was 26, after his father's sudden death. He had a younger sister he was ferociously protective of. He collected first-edition books in languages he was still learning. He had never, in 12 years at the top of one of Korea's most powerful organizations, taken 3 evenings in a row away from work. He had cleared his calendar for the week. She didn't ask why. She already knew. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know yet, was that Jae-won Kwon had recognized her name the moment he heard it at the hotel entrance. Not because of her professional reputation. Because of a name in a file he kept locked in a vault in Seoul. A file about a secret his father had taken to his grave. A secret that was sitting across from him right now, laughing at his yacht collection, stealing the last piece of Kelawheel without apology, and making him feel something he had spent 34 years carefully not feeling. He should have told her then. He didn't. And that choice, that single selfish choice, was what led to the envelope. A week became 2 weeks. 2 weeks of dinners that ran past midnight. Of Adwoa dragging Jae-won to a Sunday market in OSU where he walked behind her in his expensive clothes looking deeply out of place while she haggled for fabric with the focused ferocity of a general. Of him appearing at her office at noon with food from a restaurant that had, apparently, been pre-vetted and approved based on her very specific opinions about rice ratios. You sent someone to check the jollof before bringing me here, she said, pointing her fork at him across the small table of a local spot he'd somehow reserved entirely. I didn't. Jae-won. There is a very nervous young man who came in here 40 minutes before we arrived, ate 1 plate, nodded at someone, and left. I know because Auntie Efua, who owns this place, told me. He said nothing. You sent a jollof scout, Adwoa said. You deployed a human being as a jollof quality control agent. I wanted your lunch to be good. She stared at him. Then she put her fork down and said, very seriously, this is the most romantic thing that has ever happened to me and I need a moment. He looked startled. The jollof scout is romantic. The jollof scout is extremely romantic. You were paying attention. You remembered that I said the last place oversalted. You cared enough to, yes. This is romantic. Don't look at me like that, I'm not crying, it's humidity. It's air-conditioned in here. It's emotional humidity. It exists. Stop talking. He stopped talking. But she saw it again, that look. The one he got when she said something that caught him off guard. Like she kept finding doors in a wall he'd thought was solid. She was falling. She knew she was falling. The problem with Adwoa Mensah was that she had excellent instincts and she trusted them. And her instincts were telling her that Jae-won Kwon, for all his walls and his wealth and his carefully controlled everything, was falling too. What her instincts couldn't tell her, what nothing could have prepared her for, was the specific shape of the secret he was keeping. The physical tension between them had been building since that first dinner, like weather pressure, like the specific charged silence before a thunderstorm. He was controlled about it, meticulously, frustratingly controlled, but she caught it in the way his hand would settle at the small of her back a moment longer than necessary when he guided her somewhere. In the way his eyes tracked her across a room with an intensity that had his own staff carefully looking elsewhere. The night it broke open, they were at his rented residence in East Legon. She'd come over to help him navigate a cultural misunderstanding with a local business partner, because that was her actual job, and somehow the business call had ended 2 hours ago and they were still there on the terrace, with wine going warm in their glasses and a crowd glittering below them. She said something funny. She couldn't remember what, something about his very proper chief of staff Min Seo who had video-called from Seoul and spent the entire call subtly radiating disapproval, and he laughed, and when he looked at her afterward the almost smile was gone and something else was there instead. Raw. Unguarded. Like he'd stopped calculating. Adwoa, he said. Don't, she said. He went still. Don't. Don't say whatever careful, measured thing you've been preparing. She turned to face him fully. Just say the real thing. Whatever it is. A long silence. The city hummed below them. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. Quietly. Like the admission cost him something. I've been running an empire since I was 26. I know how to make decisions. I know how to read situations. I don't, he stopped. Started again. You make me not know things. That's unfamiliar. Adwoa looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached over, took his face in both her hands. He went completely, utterly still, like something wild that didn't know whether to run, and kissed him. He didn't stay still for long. The wine glasses were forgotten. The city below them ceased to exist. His hands found her waist, and it was nothing like the controlled, measured man he presented to the world. It was desperate and careful at the same time, like he was afraid of breaking something and also afraid of letting it go, and she understood in that moment that nobody had been allowed this close in a very long time. When they finally pulled apart, her forehead against his, both of them catching their breath, she said, "Was that the real thing?" His answer was to pull her back in. Afterwards, much later, when she was tucked against his side on the terrace couch with a blanket that had appeared because he'd texted someone, because of course he had, because Jae-won Kwon was the kind of man who organized blankets, she felt him go tense. Not physically. Internally. Like something shifted. "Hey," she said softly. "What is it?" "Nothing." Too fast. She lifted her head and looked at him. Her instincts, sharp as ever, tugged at her. Jae-won. He looked at the skyline. Something in his jaw moved. "There is something I need to tell you." Her heart did a slow, warning turn. "Okay." "Not tonight," he said. He looked down at her then, and the expression on his face was one she hadn't seen before. Something that looked, on a man like him, almost like fear. "I need to confirm something first. Before I say it." "That sounds concerning." "It might be." He pulled her closer. "Give me 2 weeks." She studied him. Her instincts were loud now, pulling in 2 directions. Toward him, because every part of her had already made its decision about this man, and toward the door, because secrets at this level of heaviness didn't come in small shapes. 2 weeks, she said finally. He pressed his lips to her temple. "Thank you." She closed her eyes. She should have asked more questions. He flew to Seoul 4 days later. He told her it was business, and it was technically, because Jae-won Kwon's life never fully separated itself from the Kwon Empire. But the real reason he went home was sitting in a vault on the 47th floor of Kwon Tower, in a sealed file his father's personal lawyer had delivered 18 months ago with instructions that it not be opened until Jae-won was ready. He had not been ready. He was terrified of being ready now. But Adwoa's face had decided it for him. The way she'd looked at him on that terrace, trusting him with her realness, her whole unguarded self. He couldn't keep this from her. Whatever it was. He opened the file at 2 a.m. alone, with Seoul spread out below him like a mirror of Accra. His father, Kwon Dae-young, had been many things. A brilliant businessman. A ruthless Mafia patriarch. A man who loved power more than almost anything. Almost. There had been a woman. 29 years ago. A Ghanaian scholar on a fellowship in Seoul. Beautiful, funny, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman, the file noted in his father's own handwriting, who made a room feel more alive just by entering it. Jae-won read the description and felt the air leave his lungs. He kept reading. The relationship had been brief but consuming. 3 months, the file said. 3 months that Dae-young had called, in a private journal Jae-won had never known existed, the only time in his life he had been genuinely happy. She had returned to Ghana. She had been pregnant. She had not told him. Jae-won closed his eyes. He opened them and kept reading. The child had been raised in Accra. The woman had married a good man who had raised the daughter as his own. The daughter had grown up sharp and capable and extraordinary, had built a career on her own terms, and had absolutely no idea that her biological father had been a Korean Mafia billionaire who had spent the last year of his life looking for her. The daughter's name was in the file. Adwoa Mensah. Jae-won sat with that for a very long time. His hands, which had signed death warrants without trembling, were shaking. He reached for the phone to call her. He put it down. He reached for it again. He put it down again. At 4 a.m., Minacio found him still in the vault room, the file open in front of him, and said nothing because Minacio had been with him for 10 years and knew when silence was the only useful thing. I need a DNA test, Jae-won said. Discreet. Immediate. Minacio nodded. And I need you to understand, Jae-won continued, his voice very controlled and very quiet, that this cannot leave this room. Of course, sir. Jae-won looked at the file. At Adwoa's name. At a photograph his father had included, a printed image recent, pulled from her professional profile, that looked back at him with eyes that were shaped, he now saw, exactly like his father's. He thought about the terrace. About her hands on his face. About the 2 weeks he'd asked for. He thought, this will destroy everything. And then, because he was Jae-won Kwon and he had been making terrible decisions in the name of having more time since the moment he'd recognized her name, not yet. Back in Accra, Adwoa was having a perfectly normal, not at all anxious week. She was completely fine. She was obviously fine. You've reorganized this office 3 times, Oma said, standing in the doorway. I'm optimizing workflow. You moved the stapler to 4 different locations. The stapler's journey is its own business. Oma sat down across from her. He's been gone a week. You miss him. I don't miss anyone after 1 week. I'm a fully formed adult human. You cooked jollof last night. I cook jollof regularly. You cooked it at 11 p.m. and then texted me a photo of it with the caption, I think I might be in trouble, Oma. Adwoa pressed her lips together. I was having a moment. Adwoa. Oma's voice was gentle. What aren't you telling me? She looked at her best friend. The woman who had known her since they were 7 years old stealing mangoes from the neighbor's tree. He said he has something to tell me, Adwoa said quietly. He asked for 2 weeks. And Oma, the way he looked when he said it. Like it was heavy. Like it had been heavy for a long time. Did he seem like he was hiding something bad? He was hiding something. Whether it's bad, she stopped. My gut says he's not a bad man. My gut has very strong feelings about him. Your gut, Oma said carefully, got you 4 perfectly good relationships and 1 that required a restraining order, so I trust it about 70%. Adwoa laughed despite herself. He's not going to require a restraining order. Okay. Then wait. You said 2 weeks. I know. Trust the process. Adwoa looked out the window at Accra's afternoon chaos. Yeah, she said quietly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jae-won, coming back Friday. Will you have dinner with me? She typed back, only if you stop sending jollof scouts in advance. I want to be surprised. His reply came in 30 seconds. I can't promise that. She smiled so hard it almost hurt. She had absolutely no idea. He came back on Friday. He looked like a man carrying something geological, heavy in a way that had resettled into his bones. But when he saw her waiting at the restaurant, something in his face did that thing again. That unguarded, wondering thing. Like she was the only fact in a world of uncertainty. She stood and hugged him before she decided to, and he held on in a way that said I missed you more clearly than words. You look terrible, she said into his shoulder. Thank you. That was not a compliment. I know. Thank you anyway. She pulled back and looked at him. Her instincts were screaming now, but they were screaming he needs you right now rather than run, so she folded the questions up and put them away and gave him the evening. Dinner. Easy conversation. His dry humor landing with perfect timing. Her stories about the week, a particularly chaotic delegation from Japan, Oma's disastrous attempt at Korean cooking in solidarity, drawing out his real laugh twice. It was perfect. Which was how she knew, with the precision of a woman who trusted her gut 70% of the time and the rest on faith, that something was very wrong. At the end of the night, on the terrace of his East Legon residence again, their place already, which was a thing she noted and didn't say, he was quiet for a long time, Then he said, I need to ask you something. And I need you to know that however you answer, I will understand. Her heart rate picked up. Okay. I need a DNA sample from you. He turned to look at her. A cheek swab. For a paternity test. The silence that followed was the shape of a confusion so profound it briefly emptied her of all language. I'm sorry, she said. A paternity test. Yes. J1. She turned to face him fully. We haven't. There is no possible way you are the father of anything related to me. Not me, he said quietly. My father. She stopped. The night hummed around them. Your father, she repeated. My father. Who died 18 months ago. Who left a file. He stopped. Steadied himself. Who had a relationship, 29 years ago, with a Ghanaian scholar in Seoul. Who wrote about her in a journal I never knew existed. Who spent the last year of his life looking for, he paused. For the daughter he didn't know he had. Adwoa was very still. Her mother had been a scholar. Had done a fellowship abroad. Had met a man she never named. Had come home and raised Adwoa with her husband, who was the best man Adwoa had ever known, but who had told her, the week before he died gently and with love, that she had a story that wasn't entirely his to tell. She had never asked. She had been afraid. Adwoa. His voice was careful. Devastated. I recognized your name when I met you. From the file. I should have told you immediately. I didn't. And I know that was wrong. Whatever you feel right now. Stop talking for a second, she said. He stopped. The Accra night waited. She thought about her father, her real father, the man who had taught her to ride a bike and argued with her about football and cried at her university graduation. She thought about her mother's carefully kept silence. She thought about the shape of certain silences, and how sometimes secrets lived in them. She thought about J1. Did you pursue me because of the file? She asked. Her voice was steady. She needed it to be steady. No. Immediate. I pursued you because you told me I was a fire hazard within 30 seconds of meeting me, and I'd never experienced that before, and I couldn't leave without knowing who you were. He held her gaze. The file made it complicated. It made me a coward about it. But it was never the reason. She looked at him for a very long time. Her instincts, her 70% and faith instincts, said, he's telling the truth. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I'll take the test. She looked out at the city. And then we figure out the rest. He exhaled, the long, shaking exhale of a man who had been holding his breath for 2 weeks. Adwoa. Don't thank me yet, she said. I'm still processing. I contain multitudes, and right now several of them are very confused. She paused. Also, J1, if this test comes back what you think it will, what does that make us? The question landed between them like a stone into water. He had no answer. Neither did she. 2 weeks later, in a boardroom 47 floors above Seoul, J1 Kwon opened a white envelope. He read the first line. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. Adwoa Mensah was his half-sister. The woman he was in love with. The world tilted. His hands hit the table. His knees gave out. And as the room erupted around him, staff shouting, his physician rushing forward, one thought cut through everything else. She doesn't know yet. And a second thought, half a second behind it, that changed everything. Wait. He looked at the paper again. The name on the paternity test. The name of the alleged father. It was his father's name, yes. But the sample number. The sample number was wrong. Someone had switched the samples. This is only part 1. The truth is more dangerous than anyone knows. And someone in the Kwon Empire doesn't want Adwoa Mensah to find out who she really is. Part 2 is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.